Well, thanks everyone for coming out tonight. We actually, in the end, did wind up getting some decent weather. It looked a little iffy earlier today. So this is the second of the socially distanced Final Thursday reading series events that we've done. And every time we don't know what'll happen next. So we're hoping maybe October, who knows? Would it be warm enough in October? It can be. But Jeff Copeland will be doing maybe something here, maybe something online, so we'll have to see. Just to let you know how things are going for tonight. Two new books. Grant's going to be reading first from his new crime fiction chapbook, Winsome, and then we're going to play a couple of his original songs together, and then I'm going to read chapter and a half, I think, from my new book, The Last Caucus in Iowa. And we will, that'll happen. We'll be sure that everything's done in under an hour. And so then we will have some books for sale in the back. I believe I'll be able to take credit cards, fingers crossed. And just to make it easy, we decided to do kind of special pricing. So Grant's chapbook, which normally is $9.95, will be $5, and then my book that's normally $19.95 will be $15. So we'll be doing it back there. I should be able to take credit cards. And since I'm the publisher of Grant's book, I'm happy no matter what you buy. So feel good. Don't feel like you have to buy my book just because you're getting something from me. I'm happy no matter what you do. So, all right, and hopefully we'll have a little bit of time for questions too. All right. I wasn't expecting the chimes in the background. I was kind of happy just when the car alarm stopped me going. But this is the nature of everything we have to do right now, right? That everything's just a little bit trickier, but I really do feel that it's kind of important that you keep moving ahead no matter what, keep making some things happen, even if they're a little bit harder to accomplish. So with that, I just want to say, so obviously I've known Grant's writing for quite a while. I've been colleagues at UNI. But he had seen all these poets who got to do chapbooks, and he was like, oh, when am I going to get to do this as a fiction writer? And then it just turned out he happened to have these two stories that would work well in a chapbook format. And then I had read this science fiction book a long time ago, the Samuel Delany two novellas that did a kind of double cover format that I always thought was really cool. And I realized, oh, we could do this. And then, oh, we can get Sarah. So anyways, it all came together a little bit later than we thought, but we're happy to have it released. So I'm going to turn things over to Grant, who you know as probably from his work at UNI, but I should also just note that he has a mystery series, a Hayden Fuller mystery series with 12 Winters Press, 3 novels so far, with I think a 4th on the way. I think I have that right. These stories are not from that series, but they definitely kind of capture his investment in fiction, crime fiction, and that kind of whole noir ethos. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Grant. Talk loud enough that the bell stops.
How's everybody? Hey. Thanks for coming out. Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Jeremy, for helping with the sound. I guess with these stories, I want to say they're both in limited thirds, so that's kind of different from the crime books, which are mainly first person. And one other thing, Jim had it sort of right. I've got 2 books out. The third one's been at press forever, and with the COVID, it's been slowed down. But there's a 4th one also in the works with 12 Winters, a series of novellas, which I have 3 done so far. And I'm going to write a 4th one called 4 on the Floor, and I thought that would be the title for the whole series. All right, anyway, this is Winsome. I wanted to give you the action story. One of these stories is loud and one's quiet, so I'm going to go with the loud one. A punch appeared through withered lines of snow. He wasn't sure, but it sure looked like a beating in back of the Trent Inn. Snow shimmered, a beaded curtain. Before a third sweeping arc landed, Eddie Sands was in tight on a robust man with a tattoo of a cobra, a wonky Shelby logo drawn by someone with the DTs on the back of a hand. He rabbit punched the car enthusiast. The man buckled into Eddie's shoulders, hands falling to the top of his thighs. Eddie hammered a two-fisted uppercut under the fella's chin, sprawling him into dusty puffs of white. And then the cabbie kicked the assailant 3-4 times in the ribs and head. The sixth kick finished him off. The back door to the bar opened and just as quickly closed as a man glanced in Eddie's direction, smiled briefly like an actor passed over for an Academy Award, and returned to the smoky haze inside. Eddie helped the girl to her feet, led her to his cab. She wore a white knit cap with blue knit snowflakes. Some of the snowflakes were shaking. 5 minutes later, they passed the Armory on Washington and Winsome's only movie theater on Main, Thunderball. Summer movies didn't arrive in this burg, population 56,000, until Christmas. Evelyn Williams was a student at Sanford Police College, and her work-study time was spent at the library. She had been out on the reservation, one of the 3 lakes west of town, dancing. Vic Sizemore, owner of the local sawmill, had arranged it. Eddie knew Vic. He had been sleeping with Vic's wife, Irene. Evelyn couldn't get her hands to work to light the cigarette dangling from her lip. She was scared and tipsy from beer and vodka, she said. "How old are you?" Eddie lit it for her. 22. He shot her a sharp look. "Okay, 20. Her brown eyes were noticeably pale, but mischief crowded around their edges. 19. I'll be 20 in 2 months. "Who is that creep, the guy with the cobra tattoo?" She blew smoke into a far-away corner. Streetlights bounced off the hood of Eddie's Falcon like small fireworks. "Runs a trucking firm in Albany, Dan Fogel," she said. "A friend of Vic's." "Uh-huh." Every other weekend, Vic asked some of the girls at Sanford Police College to escort big CEO types from here, Watertown, and Albany to the dances on Indian land. Vic had an in with the Indians. His mill was 40% staffed by them. And because of that, he was named honorary tribal chieftain and given an Indian name, Hawken, for fire. "Friend of the Indian, sure," Eddie waved a dismissive hand. "Pays them a third less than he pays white folk." The college girls were paid $100 apiece to be guests of these CEOs, she said. No sex, dance with them, make them feel welcomed, you know. And Dan, well, he started with the drinks, and I guess he figured, I bet. Eddie drove the cab with the inside of his left wrist. The meter wasn't ticking. The flag lifted. Evelyn looked away, the cigarette bobbing in her fingers. "Why did you keep kicking that man?" "He was hitting you." "Yeah, but..." Eddie shrugged. His hands were sore, but it felt good to hit the bastard. Dan Fogel wasn't the first he had super-tuned. 3 weeks ago, Elaine Cosmos, $1.55 fare from Regier's Drugs to Park Hill, a posh colonial-style exurb on the north end with brick streets and lawn lanterns, shared that her husband had been slipping into her 12-year-old daughter's bedroom, and the family priest vowed to put the fear of God in him. Mark promised the priest he'd stop, and for a time he did, but then he didn't. So, Eddie, wearing a tight-fitting ski mask, ran into Cosmos at Valley Lane's bowling, dunked his head in the toilet, and yelled, "If you don't stop, I'll stop you." There were 4 others who had needed to be stopped. "What a disaster the dance was," Evelyn said, brown eyes darkening, wisps of black hair dipped below the knit cap's front edgings. "Deep-fried smelts. Now that's not even real fish. Who serves deep-fried smelts for a fish fry?" Vic, apparently. "Anyway," Evelyn said, "the whole night some woman with helmeted hair kept offering the college girls $65 apiece if they'd flashed their breasts for her Polaroid. Vic had a big laugh over that. Lots of girls obliged, I guess." The blue knit flakes on her hat shook once again. "Total creeps, the 3 of them." Eddie agreed. He hated having any kind of picture taken. He was self-conscious about his looks, 40 pounds overweight, too many midnight donuts, and his lean buzz cut placed him in the bygone 1950s, not the permissive 1960s. "You look familiar." She wagged a gentle finger. "TV. I've seen you someplace." They arrived at her modest Cape Cod home along the river. The French porch sunk slightly left. The lights were on. In the yard rested an abandoned Chevy Impala, the back tires and hood missing. "Dad's a gearhead." She smiled briefly. It needs work." She laughed. It was pleasant. Canaries in cages. "I know where I've seen you." Her eyes brightened, mischief filling them. "You're the one who found the suitcase full of money." "Yeah." He glanced at the nubs on the steering wheel. "That's me." A year ago, Christmas, Mrs. Winona Roden, an elderly DAR, instructed Eddie to drive her to the Dawes Motel. She was full of Plymouth Rock and very much used to speaking as if what she wanted was an order to be immediately executed. She checked into her room, and an hour later she was dead. Pills. Sometime shortly after she died, Eddie discovered a black doctor's bag in the back seat of his hack full of money and accompanied by words on a recipe card for my nephews. Eddie turned it into the police. The nephews, Todd and Ted, were a couple of shrill fellas, pool hustlers and heavy drinkers who spent hours at BJ's, a topless bar on the edge of town, and mistreated the Indian girls who worked there. As time has passed, Eddie often wondered if the money had been some kind of test or temptation. Did Mrs. Roden deliberately forget the bag, wondering if Eddie would turn it in or keep the money, leaving the question of inheritance to chance? Eddie received no finder's fee for his honesty. Hell, he could have used one. He lived in a cramped trailer at a Cherokee village and could barely make his car payments. The $10,000 man. Yep, that's what the papers called me. She thought it was cool that he gave back the money. You know, I was thinking, and you didn't even make a pass at me, and I was drinking. You're all right. I'm like, anyway, he smiled awkwardly. Merry Christmas, she said. I'm Jewish, actually. Oh, her lips pinched together. Is Hanukkah already over? Yeah. It was okay, he said. You didn't offend me. How's your jaw? Sore. It hurts when I smile. Evelyn wasn't smiling. I never showed that woman my breasts. I didn't think you did. I just wanted you to know. She manages BJ's. Erica something or other. No more trips to the Reds, huh? At least not as an escort? No, done with that. She enjoyed working at the college library. Is that what you want to be, a librarian? I don't know what I want to be. Join the club. Driving a cab was supposed to lift away the feeling of being adrift, but for 12 years, since Eddie had arrived in Winsome after a stint as a radio operator in Korea, he was drowning in another restless area, listening to other people's stories, taking their journeys instead of his own. That's how he and Irene had gotten involved. She was drowning too in unhappiness and depression. If she walked away, Vic would get custody of Cliff, their son. He'd say she was unfit. 5 or 6 stays at the hospital for nervous breakdowns, Your Honor. Irene had endured 2 rounds of electric shock therapy. She's a loony, Your Honor. Vic was prone to outbursts, Irene confessed to Eddie one night as they shared a post-sex cigarette. He smacks Cliff about the ears now and then. I can't leave the boy to his father. Eddie never had a father, just a series of uncles that his mother took up with, many of whom thought it was their duty to administer two-fisted discipline. One uncle had broken Eddie's nose. They told everyone else that the kid had fallen out of a swing at its highest arc. At 16, Eddie ran from home, lived in the back of a pool hall. At 19, he enlisted. At 20, he was in Korea. Evelyn handed Eddie a nice tip. Happy holidays. She walked slowly, like trying to control the halting effects of alcohol. The shadow of a parent spread across the glass. The porch was clean and well lit. Evelyn's felt coat dotted over with specks of snow. Some gathered around the cuffs of her black Robin Hood boots. Eddie wished he'd kept the goddamn money. All right, that's as far as I'm going to read. It's 15 minutes. All right, Jimbo, let's do it. Let's do the damn thing.
All right, now the birds can stay, but they're going to have to chirp in key for the next part. And the squirrel, man, that was crazy.
Oh, I didn't see the squirrel.
I thought he was going to land on you.
Oh, great. I heard all the chirping. I thought it was appropriate. Sorry. For some reason, I'm not quite as nervous as I should be.
You want to put the mic down a little bit?
Yeah, I'm just going to tune here.
I guess I should stall for time now.
Perfect. All right. Hey, Jeremy, can you help me with this one? You had it perfect last one. All right. Cool. Check, check, check. Yeah, maybe up just a little. There we go. All right. All right, I've been practicing these songs like crazy so I can do all the changes without looking, and you can hear the lyrics such as they are. This one goes out to all you writers. It's called James Dean Blues. Got the 1950s blues, James Dean, where are you? Cruising melodies from Tennessee. She's the gal for me. Got the 1950s blues. James Dean, where are you? Cruising around a Mercury 49. Kerouac, don't turn back. Kerouac, don't turn back. I will howl for you. Got the 1950s blues. James Dean, where are you? Cruising around a Mercury 49. White tees and dungarees, that's the only way to be on the road. Life's destiny. Got the 1950s blues. James Dean, where are you? Cruising around a Mercury 49. Kerouac, don't turn back. Kerouac, don't turn back. Big Sur waits for you. Got the 1950s blues. James Dean, where are you? Cruising around a Mercury 49. Take it, Jim. Kerouac, don't turn back. Kerouac, don't turn back. I will howl for you. Got the 1950s blues. James Dean, where are you? Cruising around a Mercury 49. Say no to the army, no to conformity. Sputnik's got nothing on me. Got the 1950s blues. James Dean, where are you? Cruising around a Mercury 49. Kerouac, don't turn back. Kerouac, don't turn back. Big Sur waits for you. Got the 1950s blues. James Dean, where are you? Cruising around a Mercury 49. Jimbo. James Dean, where are you? Cruising around a Mercury 49. Got the 1950 blues. James Dean, I see you. James Dean, I see you. Cruising around a Mercury 49. Got a little nervous there and I screwed up the ending, but Jim went with me. Thank you. The last lines are supposed to be Mercury rising from the highway. It was a great image and I screwed it up. Oh well. Only I knew that, but I had to share that with you. All right, here we go now with this is, I love gangster stuff, so this is a dark song. I call it a song about depression, but I also think it's a song in the time of COVID. It's called Me and Clyde Barrow. Actually, it's called Black Sky. Kind of a bluesy song, but I play it like a punk. Me and Clyde Barrow driving down dirty road. I said me and Clyde Barrow chasing a black halo round and round. Drive for dawn, never gonna live too long. Cruising around in a V8 Ford, can't outrun the holy Lord because black sky, all I see, black sky, cry for me. Black sky, all I see, black sky, cry for me. You gotta shine a light, you better shine a light. You gotta burn that halo, oh so bright. Stagger got a Stetson hat, really never got it back.
stagger got semi-steps and a hat. Billy never got it back. Clyde don't care much for that. Never wear a dead man's hat. I said Clyde don't care much for that. Never wear a dead man's hat. Because black sky, all I see. Black sky, cry for me. Black sky, all I see. Black sky, cry for me. You gotta shine a light, you gotta shine a light. You gotta burn the hell oh so bright. Jim, take it away. Black sky, cry for me. Black sky, all I see. Black sky, cry for me. You gotta shine a light, gotta shine a light. You gotta burn a halo, oh so bright. Me and Clyde Barrow driving down a ribbon road. I said, me and Clyde Barrow chasing a black halo. Round and round, cloud to dawn. Never gonna live too long. Chasing around in a V8-4, can't outrun the Holy Lord. You better shine a light, shine a light, burn the halo, oh so bright. You gotta shine a light, burn the halo, oh so bright. Black sky, all I see. Black sky, cry for me. Black sky's all I see. Cry, 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 cry.
Thanks, man.
All right. All right, now we move to the other side of the stage, because we each have our own microphone. So I just start off by just setting up a little bit of this project. So I started when the 2020 caucus cycle began, going to different candidate events, and I was just posting things to friends on Facebook. And then I realized, oh, it wouldn't take that much to put together a blog that wrote up some of this stuff. And then as I was writing a blog, I was like, oh, it wouldn't take that much to put together a book. So anyways, that's kept building this then. So now if anyone wants to make a movie, I'll say, hey, it wouldn't take that much to make a movie. So anyway, what I did is I tried to see as many of the presidential candidates as I could at events that they were hosting. And that's the kind of first half of the book. I ended up seeing over 20. And I would say my model for this, I also teach American literature, and Mark Twain's first book, called The Innocents Abroad, was something similar, where he had been writing this newspaper journalism and then had an option to turn something into a book if he could do it. And so he had to really figure out, how am I going to make this material work as a book? And it's not like when he went to, it was about a trip when he went to Europe and the Middle East. And it's not like, when he went to Rome or when he went to see the pyramids in Egypt. I mean, those were not the best written parts of the book. It was actually when he was stuck in the desert for weeks on end, traveling between places, where he really had to that's when the really interesting writing happened. So I'm going to start with a chapter that's not about one of the better known presidential candidates, but it was one of the more interesting events. So this is about when I went to see John Hickenlooper, who you might not even remember the name of him. He was briefly in the campaign. He was the governor of Colorado, and he's running for Senate right now. And I will say this is the middle of 3 events I saw on the same day, a very busy day in June. So I approached the Have a Beer with John Hickenlooper event with some caution, since that very morning I had attended a breakfast with Bill de Blasio, at which I did not have breakfast. John Hickenlooper was the governor of Colorado, and before his political career began, he ran a very successful brewing company in Denver, so it made sense that he would be having a meet and greet at a Cedar Rapids brew pub. I'd had to hope that there would actually be beer involved. When I arrived, I could see right away that this event had a good setup. Tables were stationed at the door, and no one was getting in without being asked to sign in. Additionally, the benefit of signing in was that you got a ticket for a beer and a beer cozy. Or is it koozie? I've never in my life found a good reason to use a beer cozy. If you're nursing your beer for so long that it gets warm, you should have ordered something different. But I was happy to take the ticket and order one of the house specialties, a dark sour beer, which tasted a little thin at first, but then grew on me. This particular brew pub was the Quarter Barrel Arcade and Brewery, and the bar was faced by a row of classic pinball machines, mostly from the 1980s, a period during which I had misspent a fair share of my youth and early adulthood playing pinball. So with beer in hand and quarters in my pocket, I had to say I felt I had been demographically pretty well targeted for this event. I put my money into the Ghostbusters machine before I noticed that it had already been loaded up with credits. But after a warm-up game in which I got a credit-on match, I played again and just tore that machine up with a long multi-ball session. In fact, I missed John Hickenlooper's entrance because I was doing so well. But that was okay, because the governor decided to work the room before the formal part of the event began. When I finished my game and went over to the seating area, I saw the tall and thin governor going from table to table, chatting up people who came for the event or who were just there for a beer. And I couldn't actually tell the random customers from the Hickenlooper supporters. And though this was a nice space in many ways, it was a very loud room, and the row of pinball machines only added to the noise, particularly the classic Iron Maiden machine, which featured the sound effect of a screaming woman. I mean, it was like, ah! I hope the campaign had a decent sound system in place. Now, John Hickenlooper was not one of the better-known candidates, but I was aware of an intriguing bit of trivia about him because of work I'd done on Kurt Vonnegut. Vonnegut's last novel was a semi-autobiographical Timequake. In chapter 44, he wrote about a 1996 visit to Denver for a gallery opening featuring some of his prints. In honor of the event, a local microbrewery created a special beer, Kurt's Mile High Malt. It was Wine Coop, the brewery co-founded by John Hickenlooper. It also turned out that Vonnegut had gone to college with John Hickenlooper's father, who had died when the future governor was only 7. In Timequake, Vonnegut writes about regaling the future governor with stories about college days at Cornell, and he reprints a copy of the label of Kurt's Mile High Malt. I say all of this because when Hickenlooper made his way around the room, to me, we shook hands and I brought up his Kurt Vonnegut connection. Hickenlooper said it was amazing to have had this coincidence come into his life almost at random. I joked that he and Vonnegut must have been in the same karass. Now, that's a term from Vonnegut's Cat's Cradle, and it refers to a group of people who, unbeknownst to themselves, are spiritually linked or affiliated. And I'm sorry to be the literary geek here, but that's how it went down. Because Hickenlooper lit up at the reference. I use that term all the time, he exclaimed. Our connection made, I took a selfie, and he continued working his way around the room. Soon I realized that Hickenlooper was going to individually speak to each of the 50 or so people in the room, taking the term meet and greet literally. It was not very interesting to watch a politician go from table to table, particularly when the room was too loud for the conversation to be heard. That said, I was pretty sure most of the discussions involved Iowans giving Hickenlooper unsolicited advice about how to run his campaign, the dispersal of such pearls of wisdom being the birthright of all Iowans. Anyway, there was still plenty of pinball to play. I made my way over to The Shadow, another 80s movie tie-in machine. Looking at the back glass, I recognized that it featured the likeness of Alec Baldwin from back in his movie star heartthrob days. The fact that Baldwin was now playing Donald Trump on Saturday Night Live seemed to connect up with my being here for a political event. I mean, Alec and I weren't quite in the same karass, but still, it was something. Finally, even a pinball wizard like me had had enough, and I began to wonder when this event would actually begin. The governor had spoken to everyone he could, and I counted to see that 7 people were trying to fix a microphone. And then, for no apparent reason, the microphone began to work, and Hickenlooper started to address the crowd. Now, I usually tried to shoot video of the first minute or so of a candidate's speech, but in this case, I got footage of almost everything Hickenlooper said. So here you go. I see all the different, I guess you would say different ecosystems, and how different the West is from the East, and the North from the South, that you cover so many different social ecosystems in one state, and yet the one defining thread, or the 2 defining threads, because they are connected, is that Iowa kindness. And everywhere I've gone, people have been warm and receiving, and also everywhere I've gone, I've seen people in Iowa looking out for each other, and that strength of community is, I think, what makes America special. Now, as far as sucking up to the local crowd went, this was not the best I'd heard, and when I transcribed what Hickenlooper said, I saw that it was one of the longer, rambling sentences I ever hoped to type. But he continued. I'm running for president. I'll give you the 2-minute pitch. I'm running for president because I feel like I'm the one person who has actually done what everyone else talks about. We're in the middle of a national crisis of division, and so much of what President Trump does, dividing us, pulling us apart, and yet in Colorado, we've been able to engineer universal health care coverage in a bipartisan fashion. We became the #1 economy in the country for the last 3 years, and for the last year, I think we're going to be #1 rural economy. We beat the NRA with tough new gun laws, right? And we addressed climate change. We took on the oil and gas industry, and we got the first 2 methane regulations. Methane's 25% worse than CO2. All right, so I quit recording there because apparently that sentence was too long for one take. But then, about 30 seconds later, Hickenlooper finished. He half-heartedly raised the possibility of taking questions from the audience before quickly dismissing the idea with a wave of his hands. And then he went back for another round of handshaking, even though he'd already met everyone in the room. I mean, what was up with that? That was it? I mean, I felt like I hadn't quite earned my free beer. I mean, it seemed like Hickenlooper just wanted to meet new people and was using a presidential campaign as an excuse. I mean, there were things we could have talked about. I mean, for example, I wanted to hear him say about how he planned to win over Obama-Trump voters, since that was the general thrust of the case he was making. Also, during this event, a friend posted a reminder that Hickenlooper once drank a glass of fracking fluid to argue how safe it was. And meanwhile, Colorado was experiencing an unprecedented number of fracking-related earthquakes. So, there were things we could have discussed. Well, I drifted over to the pinball machines, but I couldn't repeat my prior success on Ghostbusters. Then I regressed even further into my childhood, playing a round of Donkey Kong Jr. Hickenlooper went behind the bar and got himself a beer. That seemed like a good idea. After taking on the Kong, I went up and ordered an IPA. Then when I looked up, the governor was gone, and the crowd that remained had either decided to stick around or hadn't been there for the meet and greet in the first place. At the bar, a woman came up and ordered a couple drinks, using one of the Hickenlooper free drink tickets for an old style. I couldn't help but note to her that seemed a poor choice at a brew pub with a decent range of selections, and though I didn't say it, old style was really a poor choice at any time. The woman said it was for her husband, and she blamed his being a Cubs fan for his lame taste in beer. That didn't all make sense to me, but as she kept talking, I realized she was even more confused than I was by all that had just happened. Her family had just been driving through from Illinois and had stopped here for lunch. She wasn't fully sure who John Hickenlooper was. She didn't even realize they were attending a political event. I took a sip of my beer. Well, I thought, I'm not sure this fully counted as a political event. But that seemed kind of rude to say, particularly from someone out of state who had just heard a really long sentence about how nice Iowans were. Instead, I said I hoped she had a good time on her visit. She left with her drinks. I gave Ghostbusters one last shot. So in the second part of the book, I go through some of my experiences going to different caucuses here, which is a little bit tricky because I wasn't planning to write a book, and I had to actually think back and remember things, which is not my long-term memory, not always the best. I write about recent time. A friend posted a picture of albums that made a difference and posted this Police album, and I said, hey, I remember we went to the Police concert together, and I felt very proud of myself. My long-term memory got there. And then he wrote back to me, oh yeah, remember after the concert when that guy's hair caught on fire? And I was like, wow, I have no memory of this. So I was like, you should remember such a detail. So it was a little tricky writing these parts, but I'm gonna read a little bit from I'll see how much time I have here, from the chapter on the 2008 caucus. And since Julie's not here, she's the fall guy for a joke here, so. All right, that brings us to 2008 and the event that has become one of our favorite family stories. It may be hard to remember, but when Barack Obama began his presidential campaign, he was considered something of a long shot. As a first-term senator who had opposed the war in Iraq, in a country that had never elected a non-white president, there was no sense of inevitability around his candidacy. In fact, he was more curiosity than celebrity when he declared his intention to run for president. The first time Obama came to Cedar Falls in the summer of 2007, he spoke in a downtown park in an open bandshell right at Overman Park. I guess not in the bandshell, but next to it. That day, our then 9-year-old son, Nick, had a dentist appointment within walking distance of the park. It was a nice day, so Julie took him to his first political event. There There were maybe 100 people there enjoying the nice weather. Obama had brought the whole family, and after introducing them, he said that Malia and Sasha, who must have been around 9 and 6 at the time, had seen their dad give plenty of speeches before, and they were going to go across the park to the local historical society where there was an exhibit on dolls. And then Obama spoke. As you know now, the man can give a speech, but he was still a fairly unknown quantity. Julie was impressed, as was 9-year-old Nick. At the end of the speech, it was announced that people could line up if they'd like to shake hands with Obama. This is what was done in the era before phone selfies became common, believe it or not. Right? Nick asked if he could get in line. Julie looked at her watch. See, smartphones, not quite a thing yet? No, you have a dentist appointment, she said. You can't be late. But Mom, Nick said, with the earnestness that one would expect from a 9-year-old whose first political experience was seeing Barack Obama speak in his hometown park. He could be the President of the United States, and I could shake his hand. Oh, honey, Julie replied, lowering her voice slightly. He doesn't really have a chance of being president. And so they went to the dentist. Needless to say, Nick has never forgiven his mother. In fact, the story comes up every once in a while when we want Nick to take out the garbage or when we cut off his complaints by noting all that has been done for him. Yeah, he says, but I could have met Barack Obama and you made me go to the dentist. And there's not much you can say to that. Now, the next time Obama came to town, his campaign was in full swing. He spoke to packed gymnasiums, and there would not be another chance for Nick to shake his hand. But as the 2008 caucus approached, both Julie and I had become Obama supporters. By this time, Ian had been born, and we had 3 children aged 9, 6, and almost 2. So we knew ahead of time that getting to the caucus was only going to be slightly less complex than launching the space shuttle. We had to plan in advance. Because we both taught college classes, we had an available supply of babysitters, but we didn't want to ask someone who babysit who might also want to caucus. I mean, that would just cancel things out. We wondered which students of ours might not be Obama supporters. This is not the kind of question one asks a student, so we had to guess. And we had a student who we liked very much, but who seemed fairly apolitical. So we asked her, she agreed, and as a bonus, she also said she would stop by our house and feed our cats over winter break when we would be visiting families back east. So things were falling in place, we were all in, and then before we left for the holidays, Julie got a call from one of the local Obama organizers. He asked if we could help house any volunteer canvassers coming in from out of state. They'd hardly be in the house at all, we were told. They just needed a place to crash. Perfect. Our house was available, we let them in and just said someone would be stopping by a couple times a day to feed the cats. So we left keys, one for the campaign, one for our cat feeder / babysitter, and left for the holidays feeling like we'd done our part. A couple of days, Julie got a call on our cell phone. Yes, our cell phone. That was, again, early enough that we shared a cell phone, right? And it was a pay-by-the-minute flip phone. People really used to live like that. Anyways, it was one of the Obama organizers. We weren't even sure how he'd gotten our cell number, but there was a sense of urgency in his voice. Julie, you have to release your babysitter. What? Julie replied, not sure where this conversation was going. You have to release your babysitter. I was talking to her when she came in to feed the cats, and both she and her boyfriend would caucus for Obama, but she can't if she's babysitting for you that night. And if she doesn't caucus, her boyfriend won't either. But we need a babysitter that night. We have 3 small kids. The campaign's going to have on-site childcare at your caucus site. You can bring your children with you. I mean, these are 2 people who won't otherwise caucus. They're not even on our lists. When you look at the cost of a campaign, it's about $250 spent for each person that turns out. This would be like making a $500 donation. There was hesitation. We had a plan in place. Things were set. But of course, we were persuaded to release our babysitter. We would bring our kids to the caucus with us. That would be fine, wouldn't it? Caucus time arrived on a cold January night. I haven't actually checked on the weather, but it was January in Iowa, so I'm pretty confident with that guess. Dinner must have been quick and unexciting. I'm guessing macaroni and cheese was on the menu. To get to the kids' school, we had to bundle up where the caucus was being held. We had to bundle up the 3 of them in their winter gear. We only lived 4 blocks from the school, but it could be a cold, familiar walk at night. By this time, the old Lincoln Elementary School, where the previous caucus had been replaced by a shiny new building with spacious hallways and a much larger cafeteria. This was a good thing because our precinct was crammed into the cafeteria and turnout was huge. In fact, almost double what it had been in 2004. And though the cafeteria had tables that must have seated almost 200 people, those seats were long gone when we arrived, children in tow. We found someone from the Obama campaign who told us that the babysitting was in the kitchen area adjacent to the cafeteria. This gave us pause, and for good reason. The distinguishing feature of the kitchen was the toddler head-high metal rail for trays that ran the length of the buffet line. But not to worry, the kids weren't going to be restricted to that area. They had the run of the entire kitchen and could play among the food preparation equipment as well. All right, now you can start worrying, because by the time we got there were about a dozen kids of various ages and temperaments, and a lone babysitter, a teenage girl who was too young to caucus and who had the deer in the headlights look of someone way in over her head. Things were already spinning out of control. Some kids were chasing each other, others were whining for their parents. The only thing none of the kids were doing was sitting at the small coloring table that had been brought in, which held a box of crayons and a few pathetic photocopied pages, and yeah, I couldn't really blame the kids. It also became clear that though the Obama campaign had arranged for the babysitting and kept track of how many kids there would be, random Clinton supporters festooning Hillary stickers were dropping off their kids as well, only adding to the chaos. And it was here that I made what will go down in history, make that capital H history, as my greatest political contribution. Heading into the night, a little worried about how things might go, we decided at the last minute to bring along our portable DVD player. Back in 2008, this was still noteworthy technology, and we'd gotten a lot of mileage out of it, literally, to keep our kids happy during long car rides back and forth to visit our families. When I witnessed the chaos in the kitchen, I leapt into action, taking out the DVD player and setting it up on a shelf that was at kid viewing height. We only had the one DVD that was already in the machine from the series A Pup Named Scooby-Doo, one of the many spin-offs that we came to know all too well at this time in our lives. I turned it on and a calm settled over the room. Kids stopped running and came over once the DVD began to spin. In retrospect, I realized that the DVD player screen was only slightly larger than some current smartphones, but in 2008, in a kitchen with no other non-hazardous activities, this was enough. Children of all ages huddled around the player like ancient human tribes once stared into bonfires. Well, if bonfires had had animated puppies. All right, thank you. Well, I guess Grant and I could take, if you had any questions, I think we're okay. I guess we didn't let you know that was coming. Yes?
What was the worst event you went to?
What was the worst event you
The
went to?
worst event. And that Hickenlooper one didn't win any awards. Let's see. Okay, the worst event, just because it was, I went to see this event which had it was held in El Cader, which is a very, very tiny town. And it had 3 candidates. So I thought, oh, that might actually go more than an hour. And it actually had 3 candidates, and everybody running from dog catcher to Senate was there. So there were 25, 30 speeches over 4.5 hours. And that one I think was the hardest one, though it was when I got to meet Marianne Williamson and have her encourage the crowd to get all lit up. Make a great bumper sticker. Anything else? Yes.
Carl, Grant, you like noir. What's your favorite, or top 3 favorite noir films?
My top 3 favorites are,
I'm making it
Favorite noir film?
I know that.
yeah, favorite noir films would probably be The Big Sleep with Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall. The Big Combo, I know, 2 bigs, with Cornell Wilde and Gene Wallace. And probably Out of the Past with Robert Mitchum and Jane Greer.
I've got a question from Facebook Live. Brooke Wonders asked, Grant, you mentioned you've been writing alongside your daughter. How did that start? And when will she be at Final Thursday?
My wife suggested it, actually. It was a brilliant idea. And Elizabeth had been struggling a little bit. She'd been getting a lot of really close nibbles from agents, super, super close, that close. And so she's been kind of reinventing herself. And so I was in a kind of writing white heat, and we just thought, well, what the heck? So
It's like a cyber cafe on Zoom, and we get together and we write 2 to 3 hours every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And she's working on a novel, and I'm working on various short stories and another crime novella. So it's been great, and we get to, it's like hanging out at a coffee shop. So we stop every hour and talk to each other, and then we go back to writing. So I think someday she's going to kick my ass and be, really well known. I just think her work's amazing.
All right, anything else? Wow, that is definitely the first question ever from Facebook Live after reading the series. I'm impressed. Well, anyway, yeah, special thanks to Jerry for helping with the sound and everything. So, hey, and thank you all for coming out. Again, it's important, I think, at this time to try to do some of the things that matter in our lives that we really need to do. So, appreciate it. I'm hoping if the weather holds up, we'll be back here in October. But look for an announcement from me. Thanks again for coming out tonight.
Yeah, thanks, man.